Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. I will always remember that day in stark contrast to the tranquil and habitual days to which I had become accustomed. Everything transformed abruptly. That morning I arose as customary, prepared a cup of coffee, and positioned myself near the window to see the external world. At 59, I retained a sense of youthful spirit. I declined to acknowledge the inevitability of aging. I had maintained my self-care regimen, exercised consistently, and each time I gazed into the mirror, I endeavored to perceive someone who remained vibrant and appealing. However, that void within me remained unfillable. Anthony, the name of the delivery boy, was Anthony. Each time I encountered him, I experienced an unusual sensation, a warmth accompanied by an enigmatic attraction. He was 23 years old. Perhaps it was his exuberant vitality that attracted me to him. For the preceding months, I had been incessantly ordering items online, books, home decor, and occasionally superfluous stuff, merely to hear the doorbell chime and witness his presence. I repeatedly admonished myself that these emotions were unsuitable, yet my heart would race each time. On that day, as I was entering, I observed Anthony delivering parcels in the area. He rode past me on his motorbike. Unexpectedly, his tire lost traction and he collapsed directly before me. "Anthony!" I exclaimed, my pulse racing as I discarded my backpack and sprinted towards him. His knee and elbow were severely scratched, and his face was contorted in anguish. Nevertheless, he still succeeded in displaying his welcoming smile. "Judith, I am well," he asserted. It was nothing serious, however. His voice quavered slightly. "Do not be absurd," I assertively stated. "Do not inform me that you are well. Enter so that I may examine you." I assisted him in maneuvering his bike onto the curb and provided support as we proceeded to my residence. Initially, he exhibited reluctance, although my persistence compelled him to acquiesce. Upon entering, I directed him to the couch in my living room. I retrieved my first aid kit and commenced the treatment of his wounds. My hands trembled, however I stroked to stabilize them to prevent Anthony from observing while I worked. I saw his youthful and vibrant appearance up close, however, there was a maturity in his expression that surprised me. "Apologies for disturbing you in this matter, Judith," he remarked, smiling. "However, that is not a significant matter." Annoyed, I scoffed, attempting to appear severe but failing to conceal my smile. "You sustained an injury from a fall. Do you believe I will simply abandon you? Regain your composure, Anthony." As I applied the bandages, I observed that he had become silent. His gaze was fixed upon me, and the atmosphere between us became dense. While applying the bandage to his arm, our hands briefly made contact. The inadvertent contact heightened the quiet between us. "Judith," he commenced gently, his tone uncertain. "I was not anticipating your kindness. The majority of individuals prefer that I deliver their things and depart promptly." I gazed at him, and an inward transformation occurred within me. "Anthony, you are not merely a delivery person. I observe your gaze towards others and your consideration for them. Your presence invigorates me in a manner I have not experienced in quite some time," I confessed, my voice quavering slightly as my cheeks reddened. The words could not be retracted now. Anthony's demeanor shifted. His eyes exhibited a renewed drive accompanied by an unmistakably magnetic quality. Gradually, he inclined nearer, his eyes fixed on mine. Prior to the further escalation of this narrative, ensure you subscribe to my channel and activate notifications to stay informed about subsequent developments. Your encouragement through comments and likes is invaluable to me. At that instant, Anthony's gaze met mine, and the atmosphere between us became charged. "This was merely the commencement," he remarked after a little pause, "that the location of my current residence is quite distant from my workplace. Daily commuting is hard. I have been contemplating locating a more proximate place. Nonetheless, the costs are excessively elevated." Upon his utterance, a sensation awakened within my chest. I recognized my ability to assist him, and this notion instilled in me an unusual exhilaration. "Anthony," I stated gently yet firmly, "I possess a modest flat adjacent to my residence. It has not been leased yet. If desired, you may relocate for a highly competitive price. It will facilitate your tasks." Anthony regarded me with astonishment. "Indeed, Judith, there is no necessity for you to exhibit such kindness," he stated, his voice imbued with incredulity. However, I had already resolved my decision. From that moment forward, I realized that everything was poised to transform. Indeed, that day marked the initial step toward disrupting the routine of my existence. This narrative was merely commencing. At that point, the tension between us intensified as I attended to his wounds. I grasped his arm, although my hand remained on his skin for an extended duration. Momentarily, my gaze traversed his robust shoulders and powerful arms. I observed him scrutinizing me as well attentively. His glance traversed my legs, waist, and shoulders. The agitation within me intensified regardless of my efforts to disregard it. I was becoming disoriented. In that time, my hands quivered as I completed the bandaging. As I stooped to retrieve a fallen bandage, Anthony simultaneously lowered himself, resulting in our hands inadvertently making contact once more. We both became immobilized. The electricity from that fleeting contact intensified the quiet between us. As I gradually straightened, our gazes met once again. Again, I attempted to interpret the emotion on his face. His eyes reflected doubt, yet also an unmistakable allure, a magnetic appeal. "Judith," he uttered, his tone more gentle than I had ever. "I must admit I did not anticipate your kindness. The majority of individuals prefer that I deliver their things and depart promptly. They would not make an effort for an individual such as me. I genuinely believe I am unworthy of such attention." Hearing such remarks caused me to momentarily lose my composure. Upon observing him, I discerned a profound and mature quality in this young man. I attempted to compose myself, eliciting a faint laugh. "Anthony, you may relocate to the apartment at your discretion," I remarked. "It seems I have been anticipating your action all along," alleviating the tension slightly. Anthony appeared further astonished. "Indeed, Judith, I must act swiftly. My landlord is attempting to evict me. Additionally, I must complete my deliveries," he stated, his tone somewhat hurried. He promptly rose to depart but hesitated to obtain my number before exiting. At that moment, the tension between us reached its zenith. While tending to his wounds, my hand rested on his flesh and our eyes met repeatedly, each encounter extending somewhat longer. An unmistakable and electric connection was developing between us. I recognized that this was merely the inception of an issue I could not overlook. Upon hearing those comments, I momentarily lost my composure. Upon observing him, I discerned a profound depth and maturity in this young man that surprised me. I endeavored to compose myself, eliciting a smile and emitting a gentle laugh. "Anthony, you are invited to relocate to the apartment adjacent to my residence at your convenience." "I had been anticipating your arrival all along," I remarked, alleviating the strain slightly. Anthony appeared astonished. "Indeed, Judith, I must act swiftly. My landlord is attempting to evict me, and I still need to complete my delivery," he stated, his tone rather hurried. He promptly rose to depart but not before obtaining my number. The following morning, I observed Anthony arriving in a sizable truck accompanied by two of his associates. They commenced transferring his possessions inside the apartment. As I stood outside my window, I observed him transporting the large boxes with his robust muscular arms. I was unable to avert my gaze. A sensation awakened within me, one I had not felt in years. Each action he executed appeared to captivate my attention. His exuberant vitality and the vivacity he possessed were captivating. Eventually, I regained my composure, filled a cup with coffee, and approached them. I remarked with a smile that they must be fatigued. "I would like to extend an invitation for supper. Let us convene and partake in a delightful lunch collectively." Anthony and his companions expressed their gratitude, but Anthony remarked, "Judith, that is exceedingly kind of you, yet my friends must return. Their journey home is extensive." I experienced a slight twinge of disappointment, however, I concealed it effectively. As nighttime arrived, Anthony appeared unaccompanied. In observing him standing there, I experienced a blend of astonishment and exhilaration. I welcomed him with a smile. "Where are your acquaintances?" He shrugged and offered me a slight smile. "They were compelled to depart. They were unable to remain." However, he expressed his reluctance to leave her alone that evening. The utterance of those words elicited a warm sensation within me throughout the remainder of the evening. At dinner, our dialogue intensified. At that point, I saw this was merely the inception of something novel. "Honestly," I remarked with a slight smile while gazing into Anthony's eyes, "I anticipated everyone's presence. However, if it is only you, I suppose there is no detriment in uncorking a bottle of wine. I consistently relish wine during dinner." Anthony reciprocated the smile, his gaze fixed on mine. "That appears to be ideal wine and culinary preparation. What more requests could I make?" His words ignited a small spark within me. I proceeded to the kitchen, retrieved a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses, and transported them to the table. Upon opening the bottle, I endeavored to disregard Anthony's gaze, which scrutinized me as if he were attempting to decipher my essence. However, I sensed his gaze tracking my every reaction. During dinner, aided by a modest amount of wine, our dialogue became increasingly intimate. Solitude, I remarked, sipping my wine. At times it is nearly intolerable. It can induce frustration. I perceive that I have devoted most of my existence to serving others. Now I recognize the extent of the time I have squandered. Anthony listened attentively, his demeanor gentle and empathetic. Love, loneliness is challenging at any age. However, Judith, your residence, culinary skills, and attire all reflect considerable care and effort. You have maintained your beauty remarkably. It seems unjust that an individual of your caliber must reside in solitude. Those words surprised me, igniting a profound warmth within. I could not recall the last occasion when someone had addressed me in such a manner. My heart accelerated as I gazed into his eyes. Recognizing this connection we were cultivating was an experience I had not encountered in years. Those statements astonished and profoundly affected me. No one had uttered anything of that nature to me in years. My heart began to race. I comprehend your point, I stated gently. However, at times, despite your utmost efforts, your contributions go unrecognized. Anthony placed his wine glass on the table and leaned in towards me. I perceived the intensity of his profound, concentrated gaze. He asserted, his tone low and unwavering. You are mistaken. Your presence is inescapable. Those remarks elicited a profound response within me. The warmth of the wine exacerbated the conflict between my heart and mind. His gaze remained directed at me. The manner in which this young man regarded me with such intensity evoked a thrill I had not experienced in a considerable time. Anthony, you are exceedingly gracious, I remarked with a faint smile, albeit my voice quivered slightly. I interlocked my fingers in my lap, yet I was unable to avert my gaze from his eyes. At that time, the distance between us seemed significantly diminished. He spoke abruptly. I must be candid with you, his tone becoming more profound. Upon my arrival, I sought a new beginning. However, the more I have conversed with you, the more my desire has become to understand you more profoundly. There is an unusual quality about you, Judith. It is as though you have a luminous essence, something vibrant. His remarks rendered me speechless. The wine, the ambience, his stare. Everything overwhelmed me simultaneously. I inhaled deeply, yet my heart raced uncontrollably, rendering it impossible to achieve tranquility. Anthony, I stated, fixing my gaze upon his, you have rendered this evening exceptionally memorable. No individual has evoked this sentiment in me for an extended period. At that point, the tension between us culminated when Anthony's gaze intersected with mine. It felt as though time had ceased. Impulsively, entranced by the enchantment of the moment, I inclined toward him. Upon the meeting of our lips, my heart felt as though it would erupt from my chest. His kiss sparked emotions within me that I had repressed for years. Yet reality subsequently overwhelmed me. I swiftly withdrew my face, reddened with embarrassment, my thoughts descending into turmoil. This is not correct, I whispered, averting my gaze as I staggered toward the kitchen, attempting to flee the turmoil within me. I was unaware that Anthony had followed me until I sensed his hands on my waist. His warmth and proximity halted my progress. Judith, he stated, his tone subdued yet resolute. He carefully rotated me to confront him, his gaze intertwining with mine before he kissed me once more, this time more profoundly and intensely. I was unable to breathe. This was inescapable. My hands automatically grasped his shoulders as his muscular arms enveloped me securely. I perceived that we were the sole individuals in existence. Anthony paused the kiss momentarily and gazed into my eyes. Judith, do you genuinely desire this? He murmured. The resolve and warmth in his voice utterly disarmed me. I nodded subtly, my voice little above a murmur. Affirmative. He softly placed his hand on my back and slowly led me upstairs to the bedroom. My heart was racing uncontrollably with each stride. My anticipation intensified. Upon entering the room, I positioned myself on the edge of the bed while Anthony stood before me, momentarily hesitating. His eyes surveyed me, and I sensed the intensity of his gaze. I elevated my hands to my shoulders, gradually lowering the delicate straps of my dress. The silk cascaded over my flesh and tugged at my feet. Anthony's gaze, filled with adoration and want, intensified the attraction I experienced towards him. This event was unprecedented in my imagination. For years, the sole remaining action was to wholly submit to the rhythm of the night. Prior to reclining on the bed, I observed my reflection in the mirror situated across the room. I appeared sophisticated and enticing. At that point, Anthony tenderly positioned his hands on my shoulders, directing me to recline on the bed. As he hung over me, his gaze fixed on mine, his hands rested on my waist, moving gradually. At that moment, I experienced an emotion I had not felt in a considerable while, one I had profoundly yearned for. I responded promptly, emitting a sound that astonished even myself. I was unable to determine the appropriate position for my hands. I felt overwhelmed by my emotions. Everything was exquisite, and I had longed for this immensely. The feelings coursing through me were overwhelming. Overwhelmed by the intensity, I closed my eyes and surrendered to the experience. Upon opening my eyes to observe Anthony, I found him hot and breathless. The sight exhilarated me even more. I found myself whispering, imploring for it to recur. Anthony, panting, responded, "I desire it more than you do." On that day, he elicited a level of happiness in me that I had not experienced in years. He appeared remarkably relaxed, reclining beside me, his breaths gradually stabilizing. Upon observing the floor adjacent to the bed, I noticed the disarray of clothing and smiled. I had greatly missed this. Anthony's warm breath caressed my neck as we reclined adjacent to one another. The silence between us was solely punctuated by the sound of our respiration. Following the recent events, a tranquil calm enveloped the atmosphere, yet I could still sense the residual thrill within me. I glanced at him. "Judith," Anthony stated, his gaze locking with mine, "I desire to escape with you to a coastal town, just the two of us. What is your opinion?" The thought ignited a surge of exhilaration within me, a sensation I had not experienced in quite some time. "A holiday," I responded with a smile, expressing my enthusiasm. "However, I am confident that this will not be an ordinary excursion," I remarked, observing the glimmer in his eyes. Anthony chuckled quietly, extending his hand to delicately sweep my hair away from my face. "Negative, Judith," he stated. "This is merely the commencement." At that point, we both realized that this vacation would not merely serve as an escape. This would initiate a novel endeavor, one that would fortify our connection. This narrative does not conclude here. The events of that vacation, among other matters, remain forthcoming. Remain attentive. If you have reached this point, I am aware that my narrative has profoundly affected you. There is far more to convey, and you will not wish to overlook any detail. Remember to click the follow button, activate notifications, and provide a comment regarding your thoughts on this narrative.